I've come up with a new slogan.
Why be you when you can be new? I gotta tell you, I think it's brilliant, but honestly, I'd like to hear what you employees think about this.
Today I'm bringing you something quite special. Now, I'm titling this a meta build, though I think it could also be described as an off-meta build. We are going to be combining the pop growth potential of a clone army build, the flexibility of a merchant void dweller build, and the habitability of a machine intelligence hive mind, all into one unholy creation. If you enjoy this video, please trade that like button. Here is the wacky build, Robot Space Merchants. So what's going on? I've gone for an origin that many people do not rank as top tier, including myself, I have to say. I've gone for Mechanist. The reason for that will become apparent later on, but basically that's going to give us some robots at the start of the game. 8 pops will be robots instead of being our regular species, and it will also reduce robot upkeep by 5%, in addition to giving us one robot assembly building, and one pop will be working that job. So we'll start the game off with quite a lot of pop growth from our bio growth and pop assembly together. Now, whilst our robots will have no traits at the start of the game, our primary species will have traits. And what I would recommend you go for here is thrifty. We do want to push up that trade value. We are merchants after all. We also want to get lots of research out the way because we want to be synthetically ascending at some point in the future as well. So we're going to be going for a tech heavy rush. Stellaris is very much a game where technology is very powerful. In addition to that, I've gone with natural engineers as well. So our engineering research we boosted by a whopping 25%. That is pretty standard for any sort of Techrush build. And then I've gone with Unruly. We're not really going to bother that much with an extra 10% Empire Sprawl. It's really not a big deal. And on top of that, I've gone for Deviance, Governing, Ethics Attraction. Shouldn't really affect us too much. Yes, we might get some reduced influence gain later on. Let's worry about that later. Now, when we look at our civics, there are 2 important things we'll be doing. First, we're going to be going with merchant guilds. That's going to replace one of our administrator jobs with a merchant job on our capital building. And importantly, it will also mean our merchants produce a base of 2 unity per merchant. That means when combined with thrifty, our merchants will be outputting 15 trade value, 5 amenities, and 2 unity base. That is before other modifiers like the modifiers to our planet to increase the trade value or anything else like that. Now, combined with merchant guilds, I've had to go with functional architecture. The reason for that is we really need those additional 2 building slots per world. We don't have void dwellers. We're not starting with void dwellers. We don't have access to trade districts. So in order to get these merchants, we're going to need to be building commercial zones as well as, of course, taking the tradition. But that will mean we're going to use up a lot of building slots very quickly in order to have our merchants producing enough energy and unity for us, in addition to consumer goods as well. These 2 combined are going to mean that our planets have a large base for commercial zones, which will be producing a merchant job for us later on. And then when our merchants are there, they'll all be producing even more unity. So we're going to be storming through those traditions as quick as you can believe. With government type, I would recommend probably Imperial, though this really doesn't matter. In this case, I'm kind of really going more for the flavor here. The extra edict will be useful later on, not in the start. But of the others, they're not really that different. We're going to be able to resettle our robots very, very easily. They're only going to cost 50 energy to resettle. And then we'll also be resettling possibly some workers as well, but that shouldn't be much of a challenge too. So democracy is fine. Pick whichever government here you really want. I have gone for Imperial. I want it to be an empire. On the ethics front, there is only one thing that is necessary, and that is materialist. You must be some degree of materialist in order to start as mechanist. From that point onwards, you could roll this really any way you wanted. You could go Materialist, Fanatic, Xenophile for extra trade value. You could go Materialist, Fanatic, Militarist for extra military power. You could go Materialist, Fanatic, Xenophobe for lots of pop growth. You could go Egalitarian. You could go anything except Spiritualist. What I've gone for here, I've gone for Militarist, just so we've got some extra fire rate and access to the No Retreat War Doctrine, as well as Xenophobe. That way I can conquer lots of enemies, lots of other species, and enslave them to my heart's desire. Authoritarian would have been fine here as well, but I do want that extra 10% pop growth speed. If you really want to rush it too, you could go Fanatic Materialist and then just Militarist. That's a cool option to do as well. But basically, do whatever you want there. Here we are, it's the very beginning of the game, and I have started off with a phenomenal amount of pop growth in total. I'm going to be getting 6.7 pop growth on my capital right from the get-go. That is from our robot assembly, we're getting +2 there, and I'm also getting 4.7 from my primary species 3 base, plus maximum logistic growth, as well as I have managed to roll Fertility Preacher for an extra little 5%, which is nice. We are going to have a problem with our Unity production at the start of the game. We are only producing 13 Unity. That means it's going to take a while before we can get the traditions we need in order to access those merchants. And we really are relying on those merchants to push our economy up into the stratosphere as quickly as possible. For that reason, I would actually recommend the first building you build on your capital is going to be an Autochthon monument. You want that extra 8 Unity early on to push you up a little bit higher, just so we can get the mercantile tradition, which is going to allow us to unlock first adaptive economic policy, so we can use our trade policy to generate even more Unity, and then from there we're going to push into commercial enterprise to get 1 merchant job per commercial zone. That's all very nice and very standard. With your very first colony, I would recommend you build 2 commercial zones here. And what that's going to allow you to do, it's going to allow you to completely ignore these colonist specialists, and you'll be able to set them down to 0 priority, completely unemploy them, and push them into being merchants. They'll produce the exact same number of amenities as a colonist, that's 5 amenities, as well as making for you 15 trade value, which is a lot, and an extra 2 to 3 Unity. Of course, with marketplaces of ideas being used, your Unity production is now going to start climbing quite high, and you're going to be able to push through mercantile very, very quickly. Although you will be suffering with consumer goods as you start increasing the number of researchers on your capital. It's also a great idea to build a robot assembly plant as well. That's going to give us even more pop growth. What we're trying to do here is maximize the number of pops we have as fast as possible. So now on this world, I am getting another 5 growth. Between my capital and my first colony, I'm now getting 12 pop growth and or assembly per month. It's also very, very important and a good idea to specialize your robots. What we're going to be doing is specializing our robots to give them faster growth speed, as well as increased mineral output. The other 2 traits really aren't going to matter that much. I've gone with high bandwidth because Empire Sprawl from Pops being modified by an extra 10% is really not such a big problem. And I do want to decrease my robot upkeep even further, so I've gone for another -10% here. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to end up with quite an interesting economy, as my robots are going to be specifically used to mine minerals. I'm going to be using the same technique, trick, tactic, whatever you want to call it, as I used in my merchant video to generate a federation quite early into the game. I've colonized a very small planet here, and I'm going to be releasing this planet, which is by itself. It's not connected to any of my other systems here, and it is alone individually, so it is its own sector, which is very important. It must be its own sector for this to work. I'm going to turn it into a vassal and combine that with the fact that I've taken diplomacy and taken the Federation. I'm going to use it to release my vassal, make a bunch of agreements with them, and then form a trade federation. This trade federation is going to give me access to Trade League, and if we just check out the Trade League policy, That means all of our trade value is going to be converted, each one trade value, into a half an energy credit, 0.25 unity, and 0.25 consumer goods. You will be generating too many consumer goods, and you can then sell them back to generate even more energy. And you're going to find it very, very easy to zoom through traditions as you're generating a massive amount of unity per month. Now let's think about how our economy is working. What is the crux of this build? So the main point here is that we only need a few jobs. We have merchants. Merchants produce trade value. For instance, Nissa is an urban world, getting lots of bonuses here. We're getting an extra 56.2% trade value output, which is quite a lot, as well as our merchant producing a base of 15 trade value per merchant. These merchants are going to be giving us our energy income, our consumer goods income, and our unity income. So that is 3 of the 8 resources, other than rare resources, that we need as an empire. That being unity, consumer goods, and energy. Our robots are going to be mining. They are mining robots. We're going to set them wherever we can to do lots and lots of mining. And those mining robots are going to be producing our minerals. Our food, well, we can produce food by having hydroponics bays in our star bases. Our biological pops will only represent a subset of our overall population. As you can see here, there are only 42 pops across our empire of a total empire size of 57 pops. So we don't have a massive food upkeep. We can both buy food and produce food off-world. We don't actually need to produce it on our planet. So far, I've described 2 jobs: miners and merchants. And now the only resources we have left that we need are alloys and researchers. So we are going to be using our primary species as researchers due to the hefty bonuses they will be getting from natural engineers and intelligent. And then we're going to use any pop we like to have metallurgists on a planet somewhere, and they will be producing alloys. So that means that we have only got 4 primary jobs in our empire: metallurgists, researchers, merchants, and miners, and they're sorting all of our resources out for us. Of course, you will want some administrative offices to increase your administrative capacity to offset your empire sprawl. That's absolutely a good idea. And you'll probably also need some pops working in some refineries to produce some rare resources. And then we get to what I would say is arguably an even more important factor as to why this build is quite interesting, because this build will be scaling very, very well. Why is that? Well, the point is, we don't care about habitability. We don't care one jot. Our merchants, yes, the unity that they are producing will be decreased by habitability. That's a shame, and their upkeep will go up slightly. But trade value is completely unaffected by habitability, and trade value is the thing which is producing most of our unity, our consumer goods, and our energy. So we can colonize any planet regardless of the habitability, and we can turn it to our advantage. This world has robotic miners producing lots of minerals, and rulers, merchants here, which are producing trade value. That means this planet here has only got 10 pops on it. We're producing 80 trade value, which means that's 40 energy, 20 unity, and 20 consumer goods, as well as 39 minerals and an additional 6 unity. You will get some negative modifiers to your growth from the habitability. That is unfortunate, but your pops will still be growing. This planet here is producing a total of 4.83 growth, and it's only a 20% habitability world between my growing and assembling population. That's higher than the growth that some empires could expect to have on an initial colony anywhere else in the galaxy, without the use of robots or spawning pools or anything like that. Here I am at 2233, and I already have 91 population, which is almost at the same level as clone army growth, which is pretty wild. We are really pushing our pop growth really high with this crazy build. Of course, your federation is going to keep growing and you can invite other members into it later on and kick out your original vassal and probably retake them if you really want to. This is a different save game, and we're now at 2238. And what's going on? Well, this empire has 102 population. And we've got quite a few interesting things. So we have an alloy producing world pushing out lots of alloys for us. We have 2 trade worlds pushing out lots and lots of trade value as well. And our capital is making a nice amount of research for us. There are other planets in my space as well. For instance, a tropical world here and a continental world that I'm going to settle and continue expanding into. Now, whilst this build might not be the most aggressive at 2230, if you could stave off some early wars, you're going to snowball later on into a massively powerful merchant robot empire. I would recommend going down the synthetic ascendancy path. Before you fully synthetically ascend, you're going to want to apply the original template of your biological population to some of your species. I'd recommend doing this specifically on your trade world. So for me, that would be Caledonia here and Regium, and that way we're going to have plenty of pops which still have access to the thrifty trait after our ascension. That thrifty trait is going to be really good for our merchants. We do want to keep that. There is no robotic equivalent, but the rest of our empire can be filled with robot workers working things like metallurgist jobs and research jobs. I would also recommend you go with academic privilege. All of your biological pops are going to be pretty much specialists or rulers. You might as well benefit from that extra 10% research points, as well as even more happiness, which will give you more stability, which then gives you more trade value and more outputs. By reducing the complexity of the jobs we need in order to get the resources that we want, it makes this, in some ways, Stellaris on easy mode. Something I haven't done, but I'd recommend you do as well: unemploy your administrators. You don't need them. Push them into merchant jobs. Get more trade value out of those pops. Don't be silly. And make sure to go with a militarized economy. You will not be producing consumer goods, so it is a free plus 25 bonus to your alloy output. If you'd like to really see this build in action, I'll be showing it off in a live stream this Saturday at 6 PM CEST. If this Saturday has already passed, you should see a link to that live stream right now. Click the video on screen.